Good morning, family. How are you? This is Mr. LJ Moss, coming to you live and well, and actually waiting to get a load. But anyways, want to step to you guys this morning and just say how you doing. One of the first episodes that we're recording of navigating the minefields of hindering forces. I was reading or sitting while I was getting loaded today, just going back what we talked about minefield. It was a weapon of warfare that was used in battle, that would be underneath, that the enemies would hide against their oncoming armies and things like that, underneath sand and underneath things. So it was weapons that was concealed, weapons that you could not see, weapons that once the enemy came, I'll never forget, I have this, when they were storming Normandy, the beach, and they had all these different, and you see soldiers storming the beach, and things begin to blow up because now they're stepping on these landmines that they didn't know was there. But the enemy had set them there and concealed them as a trap, to stop progress, to stop the oncoming onslaught that the soldiers was getting ready to embark on. So it was very interesting to me that those weapons were concealed, and there was like a surprise attack, an ambush, so to speak. So that's just going to kind of give you back an overview of why I'm saying navigating. To navigate means to find your way around, to know what's in front of you, to make sure that you're staying on course to your destination. So that's why I was in my spirit, and I used navigating the minefield of hindering forces, because once again, I would say, on your road to destiny, on your road to do whatever it is that you need to do, there are minefields, there are forces that have been set in your path to hinder you, and the enemy will use those things. And I'm not just going to always be on a spiritual tip, but understand this: everything seen is dictated by the unseen. And so a lot of people don't want to hear about the spiritual realm, but a lot of things that's going on with you, and a lot of things why you're not progressing and not moving, and you're stagnant, and you keep going around in circles, or you keep being thrown off your path that you have a good idea one moment, and then in the very next moment you're upset, or you're pissed off, or you're this, or you're that. It's because there's forces out there that have been assigned to stop your progress, to be assigned to stop you from reaching God's best for you, to be assigned to stop you from becoming who you're ultimately supposed to be. You might think you're who you are, but you're just a version of yourself. You have not yet stepped all the way into who God has called you to be, and not only just who God has called you to be, but who you are in totality as a person. So those are just things. We have to understand here that there are things that are assigned to stop us. So navigating the minefield of hindering forces. And I was reading a story about David. David is a very intriguing character in the Bible for me, because he reminds me a lot of my own life, the ups and downs, the ins and outs. And David he made many mistakes. He had many what I like to call schisms about himself, meaning he had a lot of things. He was lustful, he liked women, he was insecure as a kid, secure but insecure, because if you know anything about David's life, David was the last of his dad's children, that he was out in the fields with the sheep. He was a shepherd boy, while all of his older brothers was in battle, and his dad praised his older brothers and he loved his older brothers. But David was always alone, isolated off to himself, doing his own thing, but not knowing that while he was isolated and all off to himself, God was preparing him. God was doing things in him. He was building character in David. David was having wars nobody knew about. He was fighting lions and bears and building his character about himself. But I can imagine putting myself in where you got all these older brothers and your dad loves these older boys and he's always talking about them, and he's always, hey, David, you go out here. You go to the sheep field. You go deal with the sheep. You go pick up the sheep mess, and you and nobody knew it. Even when the prophet came to his dad's house, he only presented the older brothers at first. But the prophet was wise enough to say, hey, there's another one. So it lets you know the dynamic of the family, that David was kind of the black sheep of the family, but not in God's eyes. So didn't want to get too far into that, but I did want to say this. So it says, I was reading the scripture, and I think it's somewhere in 2 Samuel. And like I said, this is not going to always be a spiritual thing, but one of those things that is a hindering force to a lot of us, especially to me. And you're going to hear me refer to me a lot. This is kind of, I'm stepping out on some things that, I've held in a long time. I'm a very private person for people out there, and as I'm sure a lot of you are private, you don't like to share, but your testimony is the only thing that can save someone else's life sometime. So there was a lot of things, though, that I was reading about David, like I said, and one of the things is sin. People say, what is sin? Simply put, sin is what detaches you from the presence of God. It puts a barrier between you and God, because God detests sin. And I'm not saying no one's perfect. We all fall short of the glory of God. We all sin. But constant sin and perpetual sin will begin to separate you from the presence of God. And then what happens is, as you walk in sin, you go into a different territory. You leave God's protection into the enemy's protection. And so now what happens is this. You're walking in sin. So guess what? Who is the father of sin? The enemy, the devil. So if you're walking in perpetual sin in your life, and you got perpetual sin in your life, guess what happens? Guess whose territory you're on? Exactly. You're on his territory. You're moving as his child, because he is the father of sin. So what I wanted to say was, sin dictates a lot of what's going on in your life. Sin draws a lot of different things to your life. You open yourself up to all these forces that I've been talking about. Insecurities, lust, drug use, addiction, frustrations, agitations, all these different things that hinder you, procrastination, doubt, worry, stress, all these little things that you go through in yourself and in your body and in your mind, and the deficiencies that you feel you have, and you keep saying, I just can't help myself, and insecurity and all these different things. You open yourself up more to them when you're walking in a life of sin. And I had to learn that. Like, I was churched, but I didn't have a relationship growing up. You know what I'm saying? I had to learn relationship with God and understand the character of God, and understand that he loves me no matter what I'm doing, no matter what I'm going through, no matter where I am. God loves me. He don't love the sin, but he loves me. So it helped me to realize that sin is a major part of opening the door to so many other things, because you're walking in sin. So I definitely want you to understand that, and that's why I wanted to mention that first. And we'll dig deeper. Excuse the noise in the background, but we'll dig deeper into sin and what it does. sin, we know just from Adam and Eve what sin ultimately created. So it creates so many different other things. It opens the door to so much other stuff that we want to really check. Am I walking in a life of sin? Am I giving myself over to sin constantly? Have I asked for forgiveness for these different types of sins? Because if you don't, and it's almost like you can be walking in one area in truth and then in the other area in a lie. So you got to evaluate everything that we're dealing with and everything that's going through to understand, okay, why am I here? First of all, is there sin in my life? Am I walking in perpetual sin? Because before you ever do that, before you ever deal with any of those other vices, hatred, unforgiveness, all those other things that we deal with as human beings, you have to ask yourself, am I walking? Have I opened the door to these things through a life of sin? So, and I wanted to just say this, and I'm going to conclude with this. So in 2 Samuel 13 and 20, it says, during this time, he was talking to David about David had sinned with Bathsheba. He had her husband killed, and what happened was, the prophet Nathan gave him a parable, and when David said, okay, man, whoever that parable, and he responded to that parable, well, that guy, whoever's in that parable, he should be made responsible for what he did. But Nathan simply used the parable, and I'm not going to go into what the parable was, but he used the parable and when David said what he said, Nathan said, David, that man is you. So David was like, oh, I sinned against the Father. In this is what I want to tell you. This is how, after you check yourself, am I living a life? If all this stuff is opened up to me, have I opened doors because of sin in my life? This is how you come back from sin. And it stuck out to me so good. It says, 2 Samuel 12:18. It says, actually 2 Samuel 13, and from 15 to 20, I'm going to read it. It says, after Nathan returned to his home, the Lord sent a deadly illness. One of the consequences for David sinning back then in the Old Testament, it was that the Lord sent a sickness onto David's wife and his son. And he said that the son was from the woman he cheated with. Okay, so anyway, the son winds up dying. But this is David said once he found out his son died. He said, the Lord said, then on the seventh day the child died. David's advisors were afraid to tell him. He wouldn't listen to reason while the child was ill. They said, what drastic thing will he do when he tell him the child is dead? When David saw them whispering, he realized what had happened. He said, is the child dead? He asked. Yes, they replied, he is dead. Then David got up from the ground. This is what you do. This is how we recover from being in sin. Then David got up from the ground, washed himself, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. He went to the tabernacle and worshiped the Lord. After that, he returned to the palace and was served food and ate. That is a good revelation and illustration on how you come back. First of all, once you've realized I've opened the door to all these other things by walking in sin. This is what you do. You pick yourself up. Because sin will beat you down. It will cost you more than you ever want to pay in your life. So you pick yourself up. But secondly, you wash yourself off. That can mean literally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. You got to go through a washing. You got to forgive yourself. You got to cleanse yourself of everything that you've allowed to attach to you that was dirty. Then put on lotions. So because when you down and out and you run in the streets and you in your mess and stuff like that, you just out there doing your thing. You beat up. You know what I'm saying? You might look good, but you don't look good on the outside, but you're not good on the inside. So pick yourself up. Get up. Wash yourself off. Cleanse yourself. Detach yourself from anything that's dirty. Whatever, I mean, mind, body, and soul. Cleanse yourself. He changed his clothes. That means I'm changing my life. All my old habits, all the things I've been doing, all the things, the people I've been hanging with, the places I've been going, the stuff I've been allowing to come out my mouth and go in my mouth, it changes. Change your clothes. Change your thinking. Change your habits. Change your environment if it's needed. Change your friends if it's needed. Get out that relationship if it's needed. Then it says this. He went to the tabernacle and worshiped. Okay, I'm not going to go back and forth. I don't need to go to church and all this. I'm not going to go back and forth with you guys about that. But remember, you are the church. But you are called to worship. You were made to worship. We were made to worship God. Live a life of worship, and not just here, but how we live our lives should be a life of worship. And that's where a lot of us fall short. I fell short of that so many times in my life. You know what I'm saying? So I understand. I get it. It ain't always easy, but it's necessary. So live a life of worship. After that, guess what happens? You pick yourself up, you clean yourself off, you change your clothes, and then you return to the palace. See, it's this misconception out there in the world that people will throw you away because of your past, but you are still a king and a queen. Just because you have a past don't mean your past is your future, and don't mean that what God had for you originally has been lost. You can return to the palace. Trust and believe, we can all return to the palace. But it's some things, like I said, we got to get up, cleanse ourselves, wash ourselves, change our environment, change our clothes, and then we can return to the palace. And then it says he was served food and ate. So as I return to the palace, now provision comes. Now substances come. Now I can see things happening in my life because I'm living life on a different level. I've returned to the palace. And you know, in the palace you can see because you high up. Your sight, your elevation is high. So you can see. You're not down with the chickens, you up with the eagles. So I admonish you guys. This was just the first episode of navigating the minefield of hindering forces. I thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you guys. I will be back soon, but I just wanted to really touch on briefly on the very thing that opens the door to all the other things we will be discussing. And like I said, I'll have people on here eventually with me, just having a discussion. It won't always be it's going to be biblically based all the time, because if I know that every unseen thing, every seen thing comes from the unseen place. So you guys have a blessed day. I look forward to being with you again shortly. And remember, if you're walking in a life of sin, perpetual sin, ask God to forgive you. Understand and evaluate every area of your life. Get up, cleanse yourself. I'm not saying you're going to walk perfectly. Nobody in this world ever. Only perfect person was God himself. You can never be perfect, but you can always give perfect effort in the way that you live. All right? God bless. LJ out.